Redditors who were once considered suspect of a crime they did not commit. What's it like being held under suspicion and how did it affect your life? I was prosecuted in 2014 having been charged with conspiracy to commit criminal damage over a 2-year period to a value of about £200k. I was on bail for 9 months during which I couldn't speak to 8 of my best mates. I had to find time to attend court without it affecting my work, and I had to fork over £5k in legal aid contributions. My home was raided. I was arrested. I suffered from anxiety and it put me and my family under an awful lot of stress. I knew I wasn't guilty and it felt like my life was on hold for ages. After 2 weeks of trial, the prosecution offered no evidence and I was, therefore, found not guilty. It felt like the world was lifted from my shoulders. Not me, but a friend of mine was arrested on charges of downloading child pornography. The whole thing took 2 years to come to court, which was instantly dismissed due to him being able to prove he was on vacation and had left a friend house sitting during the time of the downloads. Those 2 years destroyed his life though. Local paper released his arrest details. He lost his job. His house was attacked by a mob. He had to pick up and leave in the middle of the night with nothing. He's never been back, so he lost the house he owned and all of his possessions. He ended up living in a tent It's been probably 5 years since he was totally acquitted and he's just now got his life back to normal. My ex was accused of robbing a house, and I was accused of being the getaway driver. The cops came to my house and questioned me. My ex had been out of town working, and you'd think that would have been an airtight alibi, but it wasn't. They figured where he was he could have robbed the house and been where he was to start work. He came home early to deal with this despite my protesting. They arrested him visiting his terminally ill mom. I had our baby with me, and they told me to follow them to the station where they would have CPS waiting to take custody of our baby. I ran to my mom's house. They tried to arrest me as a getaway driver, but I had an absolute airtight alibi, and they had to let me go. They kept him for the charges of home invasion. Our relationship suffered after that. Said I cast too much suspicion when I ran with the baby, and it looked like I was stashing the stolen property. He lost his job because of it. They printed it in the local paper that he was arrested for the crime. After further investigation, we were implicated by the actual robbers. They knew I was a stay-at-home mom and didn't figure I'd have an alibi, and they didn't know that he had been working out of time. They gave the police our name and the plates off my car. The police never printed a retraction saying he wasn't the robber. There wasn't a retraction saying that I was no longer a suspect. Our names were ran through the mud. It completely ruined our relationship because he said I hung him out to dry. I had to move away and start over because people wouldn't hire me. I almost went to jail and had my identity frozen because some guy had the same first name and last name as me. Born on the same day, same month, same freaking year. This guy was on parole and I think had a warrant out for him too. The only thing that saved me was that we lived in different counties, which happened to be right next to each other. The DMV had to contact the Hall of Records and compare our social security numbers to make sure that I wasn't the one on parole. I dealt with it for several years. Multiple police logs about my mistaken identity. Multiple times being put in the back of a squad car because they thought I was him. I hope he got his crap together. Similar thing happened to my father, except the guy was 10 years younger, a foot shorter, and 100 pounds heavier than my dad. The guy also lived in a different state from where we lived, which is what finally clued them as well. I, 25F, recently found out that during my parents' divorce when I was 4, my mom accused my dad of molesting me and had him take a polygraph to prove that he hadn't. It all stemmed from me blowing raspberries on my mom's thigh at the pool and a lady near he saying how inappropriate that was, so my mom asked me where I learned that from, to which I replied, "Daddy does it to me and it tickles." But really it was just that. Just a great dad blowing raspberries on his daughter to make her laugh. My dad said it was devastating being accused of that. Just that my mom thought he was even capable of it. Really sad, especially now that I am an adult and I am married and have kids. I could see my husband doing the same thing to our daughter and it breaks my heart thinking of how an accusation like that would make him feel. Being falsely accused of child molestation is heck. Fully half of people won't care about any evidence. Just an accusation is good enough for them to consider you guilty. I was accused of raping my granddaughters. My ex was really upset that I had partial custody of my kids, so much so that when my oldest was going through a divorce, made the accusation in a letter to the court. I found out about the letter about a week before the police wanted to talk to me. In the letter there was details, dates, descriptions of exactly what I did. My ex had written the letter in hopes that her daughter would lose custody of the kids. In fact, the other two daughters and several of their boyfriends made the same accusation. 2 days before I was called in, CPS and the courts interviewed my daughter and her kids. The dates were BS as she could prove that the kids were at their bio dads. I was asked to come with and I brought an attorney I went to HS with. It was just like on TV. They started the interview, but were quickly called away immediately, so my attorney and I waited for 2+ hours. Then they dismissed me. Turns out CPS proved that nothing happened, and I wasn't even supposed to be interviewed. There was a hearing and the judge tossed out all the letters written by her sisters, my ex and the BFs. Then the judge admonished them and fined my ex for wasting their time. The consequences? I have an interesting story to tell. No more contact with my ex. However, I can't run for office as she pulls out this BS to anyone who will listen even when she is proven a liar. I was a little annoyed the cops hadn't gotten their ducks in a row before interviewing me, but my attorney didn't charge me anything except his direct expenses. People that don't want to believe you're innocent won't believe you're innocent. My senior year of high school I was accused of threatening to let a bomb go off from a note that was found in the bathroom. It had a picture of how to construct a bomb and a threat that said I will blow this school up with my name on it. It was clearly the fakest thing ever, but the school was taking no chances. I was held in a room for about 3 hours with 2 cops who talked about how I was going to be charged with multiple crimes and how my house was going to be searched despite my claims that I was innocent. I was handcuffed in a chair that was very uncomfortable as the cops told me about how I was going to be taken downtown. It was pretty terrifying, I'll admit, and it didn't help that the cops seemed to almost enjoy telling me about all the bad things that was going to happen to me. I just hoped that they would hopefully find out I didn't do it. Eventually my best friend at the time confessed that it was him who put the note in the bathroom, and after a little while I was able to leave. He was a close family friend and my family almost couldn't believe it. My mom even cried, though my dad wasn't too surprised. I have struggles to this day making friends because what happened. It's something that I still think about from time to time. I think never really finding out why my friend did it haunts me more than being arrested itself. I'm really sorry, man. Who knows what his motivations were, although it's fair to guess he didn't really think it through. It is good that he confessed, though a lesser person would have doubled down and protect himself, but he did the right thing in the end. My stepmom was a special type of person. After I came into her life, her only goal was to make sure I was less successful than her son. This included accusing me of things I didn't do just to get me in trouble and ruin my reputation. I had been away 6+ years and thought it was all behind me, but then I decided to have a child. She could not handle that I was having a kid before her son was. She accused me of stealing $20,000 from a lockbox in her room. That would be a felony and 5 years in prison for me. She would have been thrilled. Luckily for me, this wasn't the first time she accused me of stealing. She had accused me before of stealing money from my stepbrother in a successful plan to get my dad to stop paying for my college and eventually get me kicked out of the house. She made sure to spread the news and I was pretty much disowned from my family and lost a lot of friends. Never was able to finish college and was left to struggle on my own. But from researching what I should have done back then prepared me for the second time. As soon as I heard what she was doing this time, I got the lawyer, got together any evidence I could find to account for my whereabouts for the previous few weeks, printed out bank statements and any receipts of purchases I had made. Luckily they never even officially brought me in, but it wasted a lot of time and money going through all that bulls. Reading some of these stories, I feel lucky I dealt with reasonable authorities, but anytime you are accused of something like that, even when innocent people don't look at you the same. For example, a few months later at a family get-together for the holiday, I went to use the upstairs bathroom. That was the one designated for crapping in. It was always the rule. When I was walking up, I see my aunt shoot a look at my uncle and everyone got a little quieter. Of course no one will say it out loud, but they all thought I might steal something while up there alone. I come out of the bathroom to two of my uncles standing there for apparent reason and they follow me back down. From talking with my dad at the time it seemed like the 20k was really missing. How crazy do you have to be to actually throw out that kind of money for something like this? Crazy B. She might have spent it then blamed it on you. There's plenty of places she could have used the money without causing a visible change. Maybe she totaled the car or something and knew she couldn't blame you for wrecking the car but could pay to get it fixed and blame you for the money missing. IDK. Just a hypothesis. Also you may want to check out RA said narcissists. I was briefly detained when I was younger for a crime that didn't even happen, but that the cops were hoping they could scare me into confessing to. Didn't really affect my life much other than cementing my distrust of small town cops since I've routinely seen them do asinine crap out of boredom. I later learned that a lot of remote locations in large counties are where they send the cops that have disciplinary problems hoping the lower population density will reduce their ability to cause trouble. Reposting this from a previous thread. It's late and I can't be bothered to retype. TLDR. Was arrested and charged with burglary. Got off when police admitted evidence was flawed. Nearly 30 years ago, I quit a job shortly after there was a break-in. Small, high street employment agency. 5 of us in the branch. About 2 days after I quit, there was another break-in and, whoever it was, torched the place, gutting the inside. I was hauled into the local police station by the SID and spent a pleasant 3 days being interrogated by 2 detectives who were convinced I was their man. They had a small pane of glass that, while remaining intact, had been kicked in, so whoever it was could gain access to the building. On the glass was a footprint from a training shoe that was the same brand and model as the ones I was wearing. They took my shoes as evidence, charged me with burglary, possibly expecting it would be easier to nail an arson charge after a conviction for this, and sent my shoes off to forensic along with the pane of glass. About a month later, I appear at the magistrate's court. Case is called. Prosecutor asks to approach the bench. There's a huddle between the magistrate, the prosecutor, my lawyer and a junior member of the SID. Not one of the a-holes who was interrogating me. My lawyer came back grinning and said to me, "You're gonna love this." Turns out, the print showed it was the same brand and type of shoe. However, the print was from a size 8 and my shoes were a size 13. Case dismissed. I did get to ask, loudly, "Can I have my shoes back now?" Magistrate grins, looks at the copper and says, "Well, can Mr. Bard Sinister have his shoes back?" I swear that copper blushed when he said, "Right away, Your Honor," and they'd even been cleaned. Bless em. Never been so grateful for having big feet. That's some interesting logic they had there. Only one person on the planet wears this type of shoe, and it's clearly you. It's been fun. I was once brought to the military commissariat. That's the place in Russia where all the stuff about the military forces in the region is done. That was some time ago. I wasn't 18 yet and I had to bring my father too. They told me that there was a guy in Crimea who tried to purchase a place in FBI. He called somebody that he was making a deal with using a phone that he borrowed from a man on the street. When he got caught, he told the authorities the name of phone's owner, which matches with my name completely. Consider that the patronymic father's name is a part of a name too in Russia. I asked all of their questions, told them I never was in Crimea. They copied some stuff from my phone's AC and I left. They never bothered me again. It was the oddest experience I had in my life. I'm glad they stopped with just copying some of your information down and didn't screw with your life any further. Coincidences like these can be devastating. Not a crime, but during middle school, my school was getting reports of kids being bullied. I was one of them, but the kids were too afraid to give names. I was the only one that went ahead and ratted the dickhead. Well, the school didn't care to protect my identity when confronting him and he told them that I was the bully. Then he proceeded to threaten all the other kids in my class to testify against me and free his butt. This worked for a year. It was horrible and I came pretty close to suicide since all kids avoided me like the plague and cause he would still keep bullying me and the school was thinking it was my fault. I was 13. Being held responsible for being bullied is one of the most morally disgusting things that can happen to a child. I know the feeling. I sold my house. Had to pay lawyer a bill. I paid in person with a check. A month later I got a debt collector's note for failure to pay or some such. Rang up. They had no record of payment. I had check stub and bank records. Okay, must have been the secretary. No biggie. Hang up. Next month. Get visited at work by a dude with a court summons. What? Apparently this is a bigger problem than I thought. Ring them up. They know what went wrong. They're just going to fix it on their end. 2 weeks later, a police friend tells me there is an arrest warrant for me. I got a copy. I call up. Yet they still know the problem, but the court date is next week, so there's nothing they can do till then. Funny thing was, the summons and the warrant had my name spelled very wrong. It all went away the next week as promised, but it was a strange ordeal. Well, that's because Papao Mau Mau is not an easy name to spell. My brother and I went to this small charter school after my parents split. We both had long hair, black nail polish and eyeliner, listened to black metal, etc. There were a few teachers that absolutely hated us, but my brother and I did well in school. We kept to ourselves and we never did anything out of the ordinary. The school gets news that a local church was burned to the ground. A teacher claims she saw my brother and I setting it on fire. The police of course get involved and start interrogating us on the spot. I was 14 at the time and my brother was 16. We were just kids. Teacher goes on and on how she saw us carrying in gas cans. The fire department finally came back and said there were no signs of arson and the building went up in flames due to an electrical fire. I don't know what happened to the teacher. I think they made her take a leave of absence. The police department legit wrote us an apology letter. It affected me because when a teacher calls us out and has the police rip us from the classrooms in front of other students, well, that'll do some damage. Even after that, people still suspected it was us. I was so deeply hurt. My brother and I were total nerds, getting spelling bee awards when we were younger, basically being teachers' pets. I remember holding him crying thinking we'd go to Juve and that scared us. Apology letter is very nice, and even a variety of template apology letters would help a lot of people. Like being called and told after an interview they gave a job to someone else, just recognition that it's over. Out of the blue I had movie-style debt collectors harassing me for an unpaid doctor's bill. I never got a bill, never mind a second one or even a phone call. I hadn't gone to that doctor in years because I had moved, kept the phone number. They could have reached me. Fun part, the bill was for a complete set of STD tests. One of the employees had tested himself and tried to bill my insurance, but it didn't go through because I was at a new job. They insisted it was me because how else would we have your insurance info up? I used to go there, Einstein. I'd be mad, but it got sorted out, plus the guy had herpes. I was accused of rape when I was 17. Backstory. Basically my GF at the time was mad because I was talking to my ex who had a BF and we were really good friends, so she went around telling people I raped her so that I'd hate her and stop talking to her. When the word got out, I constantly received threatening texts and calls daily. I started having people drive past my house and park in my driveway at night, even went as far as people approaching me with guns and knives. That's just from the community. Law-wise I'd have constant phone calls from police asking questions, them showing up at my door asking me to answer more questions. I received orders to appear. It felt no matter what I said no one believed me or was listening. I was living in constant fear of either being killed or arrested. My ex, bless her heart, was making phone call after phone, text after text trying to tell people the truth. Finally the police believed that I didn't do it, but not that my GF was spreading these lies. Despite not having to worry about the police, people still didn't believe it. I lived in constant fear for about a year. That whole thing was 6 years ago and it still occasionally surfaces, and I'm afraid it will start putting my son in danger. Should have sued for slander. When I was in 8th grade, someone set off a homemade explosive near my house. They made a huge deal about it even though it was equivalent to a big firework. Someone at my school submitted an anonymous tip that said 110% THC knows how to make bombs. I had a detective put the screws on me at school soon after. They tried really hard to get me to admit to something I didn't do. I don't know if it mattered, but they interrogated me at school without my parents' knowledge and before they were ever made aware I was a potential suspect. The detective told me, "You're the mastermind of this complex and I'm going to prove it." He then showed up at my house after school that day and interviewed my parents. I told my parents in front of him that he straight up accused me of doing it and quoted his little line. He denied it, which was such a P thing to do. It didn't really affect my life long term. It sucked when it happened and then I forgot about it. I was accused of rape by a girl I was sleeping with. She felt scorned after a night where she came over and I didn't want to have the kind of kinky sex she wanted. Not because I wasn't into it, it's just that she was becoming very weird and bossy and it was turning me off. A few days later a detective got in touch with me and asked me to come down to the station. I did. Like a dummy, I declined my right to an attorney and let the detective interview me without representation. The upside is that I soon realized he wasn't buying the accusation to begin with. I told him exactly what had happened, and he apparently must have known a few things too because he shook his head at some point. He told me to go home and cautioned me about having sex with girls I didn't know well enough. I came back to the station with some printouts of emails that cleared me since and there she was talking about that night and making it clear it had been consensual, but not what she wanted. Detective told me to go home and relax. She called me some days later and I tried to record the conversation but it didn't work. I also had a panic attack days later and didn't know what was happening to me. Drove myself to the ER and collapsed. That was a hefty medical bill. It's only years later I realized this was all linked to the stress of that accusation. Thankfully I never heard a peep again from the police, and then I made sure to never hear from her ever again. I had a flat a few weeks later. Looked like someone stabbed one of my tires. I suspect that was her. Worth the $200 or so it cost me to replace that tire. For years afterwards I had nightmares about it. I'm good now. But that was quite the lesson in learning not to stick your dong in crazy. It is crazy how terrifying a false accusation can be. You are so aware that no matter how innocent you are, someone else's words can totally destroy your life. I was once pulled over at gunpoint. It was back in HS. I was 18 and I didn't have a car, so I was driving my mum's yellow smart car of all things. It was around midnight, and I pulled over in a residential area to answer a phone call. 30 seconds in, and I am blinded by someone behind me, like someone pulled over with their brights on. I couldn't see a dang thing. Then I see a car from the opposite direction swerve across the road in front of me, and stop diagonally. It puts on its mirror lights and I realize it's a cruiser. They point them at me, and I realize the other car is a cop too. There's two of them. Next thing I know my door is pulled open, and an officer is grabbing me trying to pull me out of the car. I have my seatbelt on, and am beyond freaking confused. I see two other cops and they have their flashlights and guns pointed at my face. I click my seatbelt and am stolen from my car and my face is shoved into the side roof of my mum's car. They are all shouting and I have no dang idea what the frick is happening. Through the ridiculous conflicting commands of hands behind your back and hands on your head they ask me what I'm doing. I am terrified. I tell them I'm answering a call, and they question if I'm on drugs, and why I was driving so late. They claimed they thought I was selling drugs in the area, as it was near the local college. And I repeat, I was driving my mum's yellow smart car. Needless to say I was let go, but frick that. And boy do I distrust the crap out of cops. What if I got shot for that crappy police work? Now my brother is an officer, so I don't know how to feel anymore. I was arrested and charged with 2 felonies and a misdemeanor while at an acquaintance's apartment. Everything was legitimately a misunderstanding. Spent 70 days in a county jail outside of my home state before it got cleared up. Fricked up my mindset a bit. Still have increased anxiety and aggression. It changed me for sure. I worked near a famous college at the time, and a student was murdered one weekend. A week or two later, the head of my department asked me to come to his office, and he whispered I'm sorry as we entered and saw policemen waiting for us. The officer told me they had an anonymous tip that someone working in my department matched the description of the suspect. He then asked me where I was on the date of the murder. I said I don't know. He asked me if I had been to any parties near the college, and I said no. He thanked me for my time, and that was it. I made sure everyone in my department knew about it, and I took full advantage of that encounter. Oh, is that the last donut you have there? Did I ever mention to you that I'm a murder suspect? Told me I committed GTA cause my car matched the one at the scene of the crime. I asked if they had a description of the person and they said no. but they held me for a few and wanted to take my picture. I told them heck no, and if they did I was gonna call a lawyer up. They let me go after trying to say I was lucky and that they could throw me in jail if they wanted. I didn't care. Just felt if they were gonna throw me in jail, they wouldn't make a big deal about it. Probably just wanted me to admit to something I didn't do. But it didn't affect me. I feel that's probably a tactic that works for them. So whatever. Remember, if a cop asks your permission for something, or they threaten you with something, they likely don't have the authority to do that thing on their own. Never give them permission to do anything without a lawyer present. I was a suspect in a murder. Young woman went missing and hasn't been found some 20 years later. A blood trail was left behind at the scene. I had 2 detectives come to my house and question me. It was very daunting. One didn't acknowledge me and furiously scribbed notes. The other asked all manner of questions and watched me like a hawk. The only time Scribbler looked at me was when they showed me a big photo of her. They asked questions like, where were you on this day? Could anyone have access to your car? The type of car was witnessed. I got really nervous because it was a few weeks earlier and couldn't remember where I was. I yelled out to my girlfriend, who was lurking down the hall but unseen, where were we on December the 2nd? Both coppers jumped up to check my girlfriend. Not the same person. They eased off a bit and explained a car like mine was seen. There were 3,500 of these cars and they were questioning everyone. I worked and lived near where she was taken and had been pulled over by plainclothed cops a week or so earlier on my way home from work. I didn't know her and turns out I was at work the day she disappeared. I still think about her and wonder what happened. I feel horrible for her family. I passed on unique car model features which I though might narrow the search for the cops, but they never found her or the perp. I was charged with felony theft and robbery. I had been a live-in nanny to a single father for 2 years. I worked weekends, holidays, late nights, early morning etc. while his dad slept in late and had then got out of bed and went on dates with various women. But I didn't care. His 4-year-old son was a phenomenal child and I enjoyed my time with him. Anyways, he and his ex-wife were going through a custody battle. I got thrown into the custody battle and pee off my boss by being honest about things he was doing in the house. We had a falling out through texts and I left the house. I returned home the next week while he and his son were in Israel, knowing the house cleaner was there. I brought a friend along. We went in my room and my bathroom to grab my things and then left. That evening I received a text from my ex-boss stating you crossed the line and you will pay. A week later I got a call from a detective telling me to come turn over your DNA and bring whatever you have that doesn't belong to you. I immediately hired a lawyer that afternoon. The next morning the detective was in my lawyer's office with a warrant to collect my DNA and to interrogate me. My boss told him I snuck into his home and robbed him of $5,000 and a $25,000 ring. I never saw either while I was there. I was sure that the DNA would match because I had lived and worked in the house, so my DNA would be everywhere. Every time the doorbell rang my heart jumped. I spent most day out of the house from 7 AM to 3 PM just in case they came to arrest me. I called my lawyer daily to ask for any updates in the case. It was nerve-wracking. But the most nerve-wracking thing was that I was 5 months pregnant at the time and I truly believed I would be having my baby in prison because of a jilted ex-employer. But the detective never called back after the initial interview, DNA swabbing and speaking with the witness who was with me. I guess I will never know what came of it. Your evidence of your own witness and probably being on okay terms with the cleaner. He suspected you, but no evidence it was you. When I was a kid I was accused by my parents for stealing a jar of lollies from a $1 store. I'd been in the store at some stage with my stepdad and asked to buy them. He said no. Okay, whatever. They assumed I'd stolen them then. In reality they were gifted to me by a friend for Christmas. I hid them in my room because I wasn't allowed anything sweet or sugary. I told them that and they refused to believe me or follow up on it. Just lots of yelling. I was put in the car by my stepdad, whom I hated and did not get along with at all, and taken to the police station. He's yelling at me the whole way, they're trying to scare me etc. Which worked. Suffice to say we never made it inside. I flipped my crap. He's literally dragging me down the street while I'm screaming and fighting with ounce of might 9 or 10-year-old me has. He kinda looks around and stops. Would have looked really bad from onlooker's perspective. Acts like he's won. Punishment enough, you'll never do this again kinda BS. We get back to the car and I don't say a word. Never forgave them for that. They lost all my trust that day. That story makes me really sad. I can answer this. When I was 16 I was in high school in a small town. 30 or so in my class. And the people were somewhat preppy and prestigious. I was not. I liked cars. Heavy metal. I was in a band instead of sports. Anyway, some girls started a rumor that I was going to plant bombs in our school and shoot it up on the last day. Cool. I was playing a piano in a practice room. No business doing that when I got pulled out and taken to the principal's office by him and another teacher. I was confused because they kept asking me weird questions like, what's going on with you? What are you doing? We get to the office and there are cops everywhere. Cool X2. Eventually they let me in on my secret and this cop, known to be in butthole, interrogates me, demanding names of people on my list, and I kept insisting there was no plan to do anything like this. Eventually I broke down because I was 16 and scared and told him I was being bullied by some of the jocks, and I wasn't lying. They arrested me in front of the whole school as everyone was outside for lunch. I had 4 initial charges, 3 felonies related to bomb making, conspiracy to commit mass murder, etc., and 1 misdemeanor for disorderly conduct. Total of 19 years in prison and who knows what in fines. I went to juvie for 40 days, ended up proving myself innocent, got out with not a single charge. They still expelled me from high school and ordered me to not step foot on the property for 5 years. I'm 22 now. I don't like being in that area of the state because it's rumor central and I'm still seen as that kid that wanted to recreate Columbine. Everyone looks at me differently, treats me differently, talks down to me. I did end up quitting online school a few months in and getting my GED at 19. Then went to college and dropped out due to mental health issues. Big frick you to them. I am more depressed now than ever. I think about what happened every day and I do feel like it gave me my anxiety and these feelings of me being worthless that I carry around. I started cutting myself recently. It seems like I've done all I can but I constantly think about suicide. I feel like I'll never amount to anything and those years will always be what people see. Who knows how long I'll last here, but anyway, yeah, that's my story. TLDR. Girls started rumor in high school, got me expelled and faced 19 years in prison. Proved my innocence, still got expelled. Life isn't fair. 6 years later I'm as suicidal as ever. Commented about this before I think. Friend slept with a girl who was best friends with his girlfriend. She cries rape 2 days later and told police that held the door shut. Complete lie that was fabricated from my friend coming clean to his girlfriend that he cheated with her. I'll probably get a lot of crap for this but regret doesn't mean rape. I am 100% positive that they had consensual sex. And I didn't walk in on them because I didn't realize what they were doing, but I obviously never held the door shut. His name was cleared about 2 years later but still. People remember these things and he also got beaten up quite a few times afterwards by people obviously believing her stories. What a crappy thing to do to someone's life. It feels like interrogators really want to just put the crime on the first person they feasibly can instead of doing actual work. Always get a lawyer, people, no matter how airtight your alibis are. Interrogator here, you're correct. On the flip side, with a lawyer it makes our job much tougher. I always tell my friends and family to always lawyer up anytime an arrest is made. My ex and a couple of her friends framed me with intent to purposely make my life heck. It's an awful feeling. Public opinion is a heck of a thing to have against you if you're just some regular person. I lost my job. I lost sleep. I lost my mind because of it. On top of this, I was a single dad trying to keep my 2 kids from realizing what was going on. We would go on adventures and stay at various friends' houses or motels to keep them from realizing there was no electricity or running water at home. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.